Imagine if I told you that your addiction is not the problem. The alcohol isn't the problem. The gambling isn't the problem. The endless, hypnotic scrolling through glowing screens in the dead of night isn't the problem. The pornography, the shopping, the relentless obsession with work, the desperate pursuit of another person's body or approval, none of these are the problem. They are merely the smoke. The problem is the fire burning silently beneath the floorboards of your consciousness. The problem is the agonizing, suffocating pain you are desperately trying not to feel. And until you understand the exact architecture of that pain, you will never be free. You will simply trade one set of chains for another, replacing a socially unacceptable addiction with a socially rewarded one. All while the internal bleeding continues, most people harbor a fundamental misunderstanding of how a human being becomes a prisoner in their own mind. Society teaches us that addiction begins the moment someone takes a drink, places a bet, lights a cigarette, opens an illicit website, or swallows a pill. But addiction starts years, sometimes decades, earlier than the first physical act. It begins in the quiet, invisible moments that nobody else sees. It begins in the crushing weight of childhood loneliness. It begins in the specific disappointment of conditional love. It begins in rejection, in profound shame, in sudden heartbreak, and in the silent, invisible battles that people carry behind carefully constructed smiles. Long before addiction manifests as a destructive, visible behavior, it exists purely as an invisible, desperately screaming need. A need to escape a reality that feels fundamentally unsafe. A need to numb a nervous system that is perpetually locked in a state of high alert. A need to feel absolutely anything other than the terrifying emptiness of the present moment. The burden of consciousness, the uncomfortable, unvarnished truth is that every single human being walking this earth is profoundly vulnerable to addiction. This vulnerability does not exist because we are fundamentally weak, nor does it exist because we lack moral discipline or willpower. It exists because we are human, burdened with the heaviest biological apparatus in the known universe: self-awareness. We are the only creatures on Earth that possess the cognitive machinery to imagine catastrophic futures, deeply regret unchangeable pasts, fear our own inevitable death, question the fundamental meaning of our suffering, and carry the agonizing echoes of emotional pain for decades after the event has passed. Human consciousness is an evolutionary miracle, but it is also an excruciating burden. We do not simply experience suffering like an animal reacting to a physical wound. We think about our suffering. We replay our suffering in high definition. We anticipate future suffering. We weave our suffering into the very fabric of our identity, and sometimes the sheer psychological weight of that relentless awareness becomes too heavy for the mind to carry. Without a crutch. Centuries ago, the brilliant mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal made a startling, enduring observation about human nature. He suggested that all of humanity's problems stem from our absolute inability to sit quietly alone in a room. At first glance, this sounds absurd, almost overly simplistic. But observe the modern world. The exact microsecond boredom appears. Our hands twitch toward our glowing rectangular screens. The moment silence descends in an empty house, we desperately search for distraction, filling the void with podcasts, music, or television chatter. The instant emotional discomfort emerges in our chest. We seek immediate high-octane entertainment. Why are we so terrified of the quiet? Because silence strips away the noise and introduces us to the relentless thoughts we have spent our entire adult lives trying to outrun. Silence forces a brutal meeting with the self. It forces us to look at the unhealed wounds, the broken promises, and the quiet despair we keep locked in the basement of our psyche. And the vast majority of people are absolutely terrified of what they will find in that meeting. The hijacked mechanism, this profound fear of the self, is precisely why addiction is so highly deceptive. It never introduces itself as a cruel warden arriving to lock you in a cage. It arrives elegantly disguised as a savior, a loyal friend, a deeply effective solution to an unbearable problem. It whispers to the exhausted mind, "I can help you relax when nothing else works." It promises, "I can help you forget the face of the one who left." It insists, "I can help you cope with the overwhelming demands of your life." It guarantees, "I can finally make you feel whole, even if just for tonight." And the tragedy is that, for a brief, terrifyingly beautiful window of time, it completely keeps its promise. The drink instantly melts the crippling social anxiety. The digital scrolling effortlessly distracts from the crushing loneliness. The financial risk of gambling manufactures a surge of artificial excitement in an otherwise numb existence. The pornography effectively suppresses the deep sting of romantic rejection. The ruthless work obsession perfectly masks the terrifying feeling of fundamental inadequacy. The addiction works. It works spectacularly, at least temporarily, and that sudden, reliable, temporary relief is exactly what makes it the most dangerous force in the human experience. Consider the anatomy of this trap. A young university student feels entirely isolated, rejected and invisible to their peers. Their nervous system is screaming for connection, but they lack the tools to build it. One evening, completely by accident, they discover a chemical, a behavior, or a digital escape that briefly, miraculously, removes the psychological pain. For the first time in weeks, they feel a profound, warm wave of relief. Their brain, an evolutionary survival machine, designed to prioritize relief from pain, immediately logs this data. It remembers the exact source of that salvation. The next time the student feels the cold grip of loneliness, the brain does not suggest the difficult, painful work of vulnerable socialization. It suggests the shortcut. It returns to the escape. Then again. Eventually what began as a desperate, occasional plea for relief solidifies into a rigid, non-negotiable daily ritual. The outward behavior radically changes, but the underlying psychological mechanism remains flawlessly consistent. Pain creates unbearable discomfort. The addiction instantly removes the discomfort. The brain learns the shortcut, and the neural pathways are paved in concrete. Modern neuroscience reveals something even more troubling about how addiction hijacks the human machine. Most people assume addiction is simply a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure. But the brain does not become addicted merely to the reward itself. It becomes addicted to the anticipation of the reward. The dopamine system is not a pleasure center. It is a seeking system. Over time, as tolerance builds and the actual pleasure of the act diminishes into nothingness, the craving, the frantic, desperate anticipation becomes vastly stronger than the satisfaction. This is the dark paradox of late-stage addiction. The addict continues to furiously engage in behaviors they actively hate, behaviors that no longer provide even a fraction of the original joy. The pleasure has completely evaporated, leaving only a hollow, mechanical habit. The addiction stops being a desire. It mutates into a perceived requirement for biological survival, the socially acceptable shadow. We must also shatter the stereotype of what an addict looks like, because addiction does not always present itself as visible destruction in a dark alley. Sometimes, the most insidious addictions wear tailored suits, hold advanced degrees, and are wildly applauded by society. Think about the high-powered executive, who appears universally successful from the outside. He owns the sprawling estate, drives the imported car, and commands the admiration of his entire industry. Yet every single morning, he wakes up with a cold, gnawing terror in his chest that he is fundamentally a fraud, that he is not enough. So he works harder. He works until his eyes bleed. He misses his children's milestones. He sacrifices his deepest friendships on the altar of productivity. He completely neglects his physical and spiritual health. Society looks at him and applauds his relentless ambition, handing him awards and promotions. But absolutely nobody notices that he is a severe addict. He is not addicted to alcohol or narcotics. He is addicted to achievement. He is addicted to external validation. He is addicted to the exhausting, endless loop of proving his worth to a world that does not care. The object of his addiction is socially rewarded, but psychologically, neurologically, it operates by the exact same devastating rules as heroin. A human being can be addicted to almost anything that alters their internal state. You can be addicted to the chaos of toxic relationships because peace feels too unfamiliar and terrifying. You can be addicted to chronic victimhood because it absolves you of the terrifying responsibility of changing your life. You can be addicted to rage, addicted to being needed, addicted to digital outrage, addicted to the illusion of control. The object of the addiction constantly changes its shape, but the psychological engine driving it remains the same. The absolute refusal to face the pain of the present moment. The alchemy of the void. The revolutionary physician and trauma expert, Gabor Maté, completely shattered the traditional paradigm when he challenged society to stop asking the judgmental question, why the addiction? And instead begin asking the compassionate, terrifying question, why the pain? This singular shift in perspective changes the entire landscape of human suffering. Instead of viewing the addiction as a hostile enemy to be violently eradicated, we begin to investigate it as a profound symptom of deep, hidden suffering. We realize that every single addiction is desperately trying to accomplish a specific psychological job. It is attempting to soothe an ancient wound, shield the ego from a crippling fear, fill an existential emptiness, or protect a fragile individual from emotional annihilation. The legendary psychologist Carl Jung believed that the vast majority of our destructive behavior is driven by the parts of ourselves we aggressively refuse to look at. He called this hidden, exiled realm the shadow. The shadow contains our repressed fears, our deep insecurities, our unmourned grief, our swallowed anger, and our unresolved childhood wounds. Addiction serves as the ultimate, foolproof distraction from confronting this buried reality. The substance, or the compulsive behavior, becomes a heavy lead shield, a massive fortified wall between the conscious mind and the unbearable pain of the shadow. But there is a brutal law of psychology. What is buried alive does not die. It waits, it ferments, and the longer it waits in the dark, the more absolute power it gains over your life, eventually puppeteering your actions from behind the curtain of your conscious mind. The ultimate tragedy is that the addiction, over time, aggressively manufactures the exact suffering it originally promised to cure. The socially anxious person drinks to feel comfortable, but the ensuing chemical dependency and ruined relationships create a level of anxiety 100 times worse. The individual scrolls through social media for hours seeking a tiny hit of connection, only to look up and realize they have never felt more profoundly alone and disconnected from the physical world. The solution metastasizes into the disease. The emergency exit solidifies into the walls of the prison, reclaiming the architecture of the soul. Perhaps the most dangerous, terminal stage of this entire process arrives when the addiction slowly, silently transforms into your core identity. The individual stops consciously saying, "I have a terrible problem," and instead begins to unconsciously, deeply believe, "This is fundamentally who I am." Once the addiction merges with your sense of self, change feels physically impossible because abandoning the destructive behavior feels exactly like a terrifying psychological suicide. You are no longer merely fighting a bad habit. You are fighting a deeply entrenched version of yourself. This is why millions remain trapped in the dark for decades. Addiction is a master manipulator that thrives entirely on a foundation of lies. It whispers in the dark, "Just one more time, and then we are done forever." It arrogant claims, "You are in complete control. You can stop whenever you choose." It sinisterly insists, "You are too broken to live without me. The pain will kill you if you let me go." It systematically convinces you that freedom, peace, and joy are beautiful concepts that belong to other, better people, but never to you. And the most destructive, paralyzing lie of all is this: you are too far gone. The damage is permanent. Human history is overflowing with the magnificent stories of people who once believed that exact lie with every fiber of their being, only to rise from the ashes and prove it spectacularly false. True, lasting freedom becomes possible. The exact microsecond a person realizes a fundamental truth of human psychology: urges are not commands. A craving may feel like a Category 5 hurricane tearing through your nervous system, but feelings are not orders. Thoughts are not instructions. An urge, no matter how violently it shakes your bones, can be fully experienced without being obeyed. This realization completely inverts the power dynamic. Addiction relies entirely on your unquestioned belief that you are helpless against it. The reality is that urges rise. They peak in intensity and eventually, like all storms, they pass. The ultimate challenge of recovery is not preventing the storm. It is learning how to stand absolutely still in the center of the room, while the wind howls, waiting for it to die down. Recovery is almost never a cinematic, lightning strike moment of sudden transformation. It is not a magical epiphany that instantly cures the soul. It is a grueling, unglamorous series of microscopic decisions repeated with relentless consistency over the years. It is the agonizing choice to practice radical honesty when secrecy feels vastly safer. It is the terrifying choice to reach out for human connection when every instinct screams at you to isolate. It is choosing brutal self-awareness over comforting, warm denial. It is choosing the heavy burden of purpose over the easy release of distraction. It is choosing the terrifying pain of growth over the suffocating safety of your current misery. These choices feel insignificant in the moment, but compounded over time, they completely rebuild the architecture of a human life. So how do the chained break free? They stop obsessively, fighting the surface-level behavior and turn their gaze inward to investigate the bleeding wound beneath it. They meticulously identify the specific situations, the exact emotional states, and the hidden traumas that ignite their desire to escape. They ruthlessly alter their environment, burning the bridges that lead back to their darkest habits. They systematically replace their destructive coping mechanisms with powerful, life-affirming alternatives: physical exhaustion through exercise, the creation of art, the pursuit of meaningful work, and most importantly, vulnerable, authentic human connection. They realize that addiction violently thrives in the dark corners of secrecy but rapidly suffocates in the bright light of community and shared struggle. But the final, most crucial step of all is this: they learn the lost art of sitting quietly in the fire. They learn to sit with their own profound discomfort without running for the door. Because true freedom is not the magical absence of emotional pain. True freedom is the cultivated, warrior-like ability to fully experience your own pain, your own grief, your own crushing boredom, without surrendering the steering wheel of your life to it. The strongest, most resilient people on this planet are not those who have never tasted the depths of struggle. They are the ones who have looked directly into the abyss of their own self-destruction, felt the terrifying pull of the void, and learned how to stand their ground. Every addiction you will ever face makes the exact same alluring promise: I will help you escape. And for a short, beautiful while, it appears to keep that promise. But eventually, inevitably, every single escape route becomes a cage. The freedom, the peace, and the profound relief you have been desperately searching for your entire life was never hidden inside the substance, the screen, or the obsession. It was hidden directly on the other side of the exact pain you have spent your life running from. The moment you finally stop running, plant your feet on the earth, turn around, and face the shadow that has been chasing you since childhood, something extraordinary begins to happen. The chains lose their tension, the mental fog begins to lift. The heavy iron door of the prison slowly swings open, and step by step, choice by deliberate choice, you begin the lifelong process of reclaiming the one thing addiction tried to permanently steal from you: your absolute, unshakable freedom. Welcome to the conscious chamber,